Admiral Jin Woo stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as he watched the stars drift by. Another quiet patrol day in the Outer Rim territories. The coffee in his mug had gone cold hours ago, but he didn't mind. These peaceful moments were rare in his line of work. The bridge hummed with quiet activity. His crew moved with practiced efficiency, monitoring sensors and checking system reports. Everything was normal until Communications Officer Yuna suddenly straightened in her chair, her eyes widening as she pressed her headset closer to her ear. "Sir, we're receiving a distress signal," Officer Yuna reported, her fingers dancing across the console with growing urgency. She looked up at him, her face pale. It's bad, Admiral. Really bad." Jin set down his coffee mug and walked over to her station. Around the bridge, other crew members stopped their tasks and turned toward them. The casual atmosphere disappeared in seconds. "Put it through the speakers," Jin ordered. The bridge fell completely silent as the translated message crackled through the communication system. The voice was clearly alien, high-pitched and musical, but the universal translator made the words perfectly clear. More importantly, the fear in that voice needed no translation. "This is colony ship General Current ... under attack by Cathara raiders. 50,000 civilians aboard. Shields failing. Please, anyone who can hear this." Jin recognized the voice immediately. It belonged to a Zilani, one of the peaceful blue-skinned traders humanity had recently made contact with. Were gentle beings who valued art and philosophy above warfare. They had no weapons, no military, no way to defend themselves against predators. Jin's jaw tightened as he processed the information. The Cathara Syndicate. He knew that name well. They were notorious slavers who swept through space looking for easy targets. They preferred to capture rather than kill, keeping their victims alive for the slave markets. The thought of 50,000 innocent civilians in their hands made his blood boil. "How many enemy vessels?" he asked Yuna. She checked her readings again, hoping she had made a mistake. 15 confirmed Cathara ships. "Sir, all armed. The colony ship has no weapons and minimal shields. 15 warships against 1 defenseless transport. It wasn't even a fair fight. It was target practice." "Navigation," Jin called out sharply, his command voice cutting through the tense silence. "Plot a course for the Kepler Nebula. Maximum speed." His second in command, Commander Ho, stepped closer and spoke quietly. "Sir, that's well outside our patrol route. We'd be leaving our assigned sector completely undefended." Ho was right, of course. They had orders, responsibilities, a chain of command to follow. But Jin looked at the star chart showing the vast empty space between them and the Kepler Nebula. Somewhere out there, innocent people were dying while he followed regulations. 50,000 lives, Commander," Jin said firmly. His decision already made. Set the course. The bridge erupted into controlled chaos as his crew prepared to jump into hyperspace. Jin stared at the stars ahead, knowing they were racing toward a battle they might not survive. Chief Engineer Ra worked frantically in the engine room, her uniform soaked with sweat despite the cooling systems running at maximum capacity. The massive hyperspace engines of the horizon's edge roared like caged beasts, pushed far beyond their normal operating limits. Around her, the 12 ships of the Terran fleet tore through hyperspace at speeds that would literally cook most alien crews alive. The radiation levels were climbing steadily. Ra watched the meters with growing concern as they crept toward the red zone. Most species would have been forced to evacuate the engine compartments hours ago, but humans were different. They had evolved on a world that constantly tried to kill them, making them far more resistant to environmental hazards than their galactic neighbors. "Captain Min, the radiation levels are approaching critical," Rishi reported over the communications system to one of the escort vessel commanders. Her voice remained steady despite the dangerous situation. "Can we maintain it?" came the crackling reply from Captain Min's destroyer. Ra wiped the sweat from her brow and checked the readings again. The numbers were definitely in dangerous territory. Any Zilani or other peaceful species would have been dead within minutes of exposure to these levels. Even the tough Cathara raiders couldn't survive what the human crews were enduring, right? Now, "We're humans, sir," she replied with grim determination. "We can take it." That was the truth. Humans had spent millions of years surviving on a death world where radiation, toxic gases, extreme temperatures, and deadly storms were just part of daily life. What killed other species only made humans stronger. Meanwhile, in the tactical room several decks above, Lieutenant Hannah hunched over her analogous console, studying every piece of data they had about the Cathara Syndicate. The enemy had superior firepower and numbers. In a straight-up conventional battle, the human fleet would be destroyed within minutes. Fortunately, humans had never been ones to fight conventionally. She pulled up holographic displays showing previous Cathara attacks, studying their patterns and tactics. Something interesting emerged from the data. These weren't military formations at all, Admiral, she called out, looking up from her screens with excitement. "I'm seeing patterns in their attack formation. They fight like they're hunting prey, not soldiers." Jin walked over to examine her findings. The tactical display showed how the Cathara always surrounded their targets, cutting off escape routes before closing in for the kill. It was exactly how pack hunters operated when cornering helpless animals. "They're used to attacking defenseless civilians," Hannah continued. "Trading ships, colony transports, research vessels. They've never faced a real military force that could fight back." Jin studied the data with the calculating eyes of a predator. The Cathara thought they were the apex hunters of the galaxy, but they had never encountered humans before. They had never faced a species that had evolved from persistence hunters, beings who could track prey for days across hostile terrain. "Then it's time they learned what happens when prey fights back," Jin said grimly. The human fleet continued its deadly race through hyperspace. 12 ships full of the galaxy's most dangerous predators, heading toward what the Cathara thought would be an easy hunt. The Terran fleet dropped out of hyperspace into complete chaos. Alarms immediately started blaring across every bridge as the tactical displays lit up with hostile contacts. The scene before them was even worse than Admiral Jin had imagined. The massive Zilani colony ship Gentle Current hung motionless in space like a wounded whale. Its one-sprout hull was scarred with weapon burns, and its protective shields flickered weakly like dying candle flames. The ship that had carried 50,000 innocent souls across the stars now drifted helplessly. Barely clinging to life, surrounding the crippled vessel, 15 Cathara warships moved in a deadly dance. They circled their prey like hungry vultures, their weapon ports glowing bright red with malevolent energy. Each raider ship was twice the size of the human vessels, bristling with guns and missile launchers designed for one purpose, taking what didn't belong to them. "Sir, I'm detecting massive hull breaches on the colony ship," reported Sensor Officer Kim, his voice tight with controlled anger. "They're venting atmosphere from at least 6 sections." "Life signs?" Jin asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Still showing approximately 47,000 aboard." "But the numbers are dropping," Kim replied grimly. Jin watched the tactical display with growing fury. The Cathara weren't even trying to end this quickly. They were playing with their victims, drawing out the terror for their own sick entertainment. This wasn't warfare, it was torture. "Open a channel," Jin commanded, his voice cutting through the bridge chatter like a blade. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing the snarling face of a Cathara raid leader. The alien was a nightmarish sight, with gray mottled skin for glowing red eyes and teeth designed for tearing flesh. Battle scars covered his face like trophies, pathetic Deathworlders. The creature spat, his translator making his voice sound like grinding metal. "You dare interrupt our rightful claim. Look around you, primitives. We outnumber you. Withdraw now or be destroyed like the insects you are." Around the bridge, Jin's crew exchanged glances. The term Deathworlder was supposed to be an insult among the civilized galactic community. Most aliens saw humans as brutal savages from a hostile world. They had no idea how right they were. Jin stepped forward, his expression remaining stone cold despite the rage building inside him. "This is Admiral Jin Wu of the Terran Defense Fleet. You have 30 seconds to cease fire and withdraw from this area. This is your only warning." The Cathara leader threw back his head and laughed, a sound like nails on metal. 30 seconds? How generous of you, little human. We'll give you 10 seconds to watch us execute the first batch of younglings. Their screams will teach you not to interfere with your betters. The communication channel cut off abruptly. The bridge fell silent except for the steady beeping of sensors and the hum of life support systems. Jin stood perfectly still for a moment, then slowly turned toward his weapons officer. "All ships, weapons free," he said quietly, his voice carrying the promise of death. "Show them why we're called Deathworlders." The Cathara fleet immediately moved into their traditional battle formation, expecting the humans to do the same. In civilized galactic warfare, opposing fleets lined up facing each other and exchanged fire until one side was destroyed. Honorable, predictable, and exactly what every military academy taught. The human ships did something completely different. Instead of forming a battle line, 12 Terran vessels scattered in all directions like a pack of wolves breaking apart. To surround their prey, the Cathara commanders watched in confusion as the human ships disappeared into the nearby asteroid field and the swirling gases of the nebula. "What are they doing?" The Cathara raid leader snarled at his tactical officer.
Why don't they fight?
Properly, Captain Sung piloted his destroyer Iron Fang through spaces so narrow that larger vessels couldn't follow. He twisted and turned between massive asteroids, using every shadow and every piece of cover. His ship groaned under the stress of impossible maneuvers, but it held together. Human engineering was built to survive anything. Coming up on their rear formation, Sung reported calmly over the fleet communications. He emerged from behind a spinning asteroid directly behind 3 Cathara ships that never saw him coming. "Surprise," he muttered, unleashing a full barrage of missiles and energy weapons into their unprotected engines. The raiders' rearguard exploded in brilliant flashes of light, their shields useless against the unexpected attack from behind. The Cathara had never faced an enemy that refused to fight fair. On the bridge of the horizon's edge, Tactical Officer Tay coordinated the assault with the cold precision of a born hunter. She watched multiple screens showing the positions of all ships, calculating angles and timing like a chess master, planning moves ahead. "Enemy vessel Bone Render has structural damage to port side," she announced, her fingers flying across her controls. "All units converge on that weak point. Hit them while they're vulnerable." Immediately, 3 human ships materialized from different directions, appearing out of the asteroid field like ghosts. They struck the damaged Cathara vessel from 3 sides simultaneously, concentrating their fire on the exact spot where its armor was weakest. The Cathara desperately tried to maintain their formation, but humans didn't respect formation fighting. They struck like lightning, disappeared back into cover, then emerged somewhere else entirely. One moment a human ship would be in front of them, the next it would be attacking from their blind spot. What should have been a glorious battle quickly became a nightmare hunt. The raiders found themselves being picked apart piece by piece, never knowing where the next attack would come from. Their superior numbers meant nothing when they couldn't bring their weapons to bear on targets that refused to stay still. Commander Ho stood beside Admiral Jin, watching the tactical display with deep satisfaction. Red dots representing Cathara ships blinked out one by one, while the blue dots of human vessels danced around them like predators toying with their prey. "They're learning why Earth tried so hard to kill us for millions of years," Ho said with grim pride. "We're persistence hunters. We don't give up, and we don't fight fair." Marine Captain Wu sealed his helmet and checked his weapon one final time before stepping through the jagged hull breach of the Cathara vessel. Behind him, 20 of his best Marines followed in single file, their boots magnetized to keep them anchored to the twisted metal. The enemy ship was in chaos. Emergency lights flashed red throughout the corridors, and the artificial gravity had completely failed when the human torpedoes punched through the hull. What the Cathara didn't realize was that this actually gave the humans a massive advantage. "Gravities out," reported Sergeant Me through the comm system, floating past a viewport as she pushed off from a wall. "So, Wu," replied casually, kicking off a bulkhead to change direction mid-flight like he was swimming through air. "We grew up climbing trees and jumping off cliffs." The Cathara crew floated helplessly in the corridors, completely disoriented and sick from the sudden loss of gravity. Most alien species lived on worlds with stable gravity and had never experienced weightlessness. They spun slowly in the air, vomiting and confused, unable to control their movement. But humans were different. They had spent their childhood playing on jungle gyms, climbing rocks, and learning to judge distances and momentum. Zero gravity was just another playground for creatures, would evolve to move through three-dimensional spaces. Wu's Marines moved through the ship like deadly acrobats. Using walls, ceilings, and floors with equal ease, they pushed off surfaces to change direction instantly, something the helpless Cathara couldn't comprehend. Within minutes, they had secured the bridge and engine room. Meanwhile, deeper in the ship's corridors, the temperature had dropped far below freezing. The damaged life support systems had triggered emergency measures that would normally incapacitate most galactic species. Ice crystals formed on the walls, and each breath created visible clouds in the frigid air. The human Marines simply activated their suit heaters and continued their methodical advance. They had evolved on a world where winter temperatures could drop to deadly levels, where survival meant adapting to extreme conditions. What killed other species was just another Tuesday for humans. Sector 7 secured, reported Corporal Dahl, his voice steady despite fighting in conditions that would have frozen most aliens solid. Back on the horizon's edge, Dr. Yoon worked frantically in the medical bay, treating wounded crew members who refused to stop fighting. The casualties that came through her doors would have been considered critical emergencies for any other species. A weapons officer with a broken arm still operated his targeting systems with his good hand. When she tried to send him to recovery, he just shook his head and requested pain medication so he could keep working. Another crew member with severe burns from an engine room explosion refused evacuation to a safer ship. "The fight's not over, Doc," he said through gritted teeth. "You're all completely insane." Dr. Yoon muttered fondly as she injected another stimulant into a wounded Marine who insisted on returning to battle. But she understood. These were humans. They didn't know how to quit, even when their bodies were falling apart. It was what made them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The remaining 8 Cathara vessels suddenly realized they were in serious trouble. Their confident attack formation had crumbled under the relentless human assault. And now, panic was setting in among the raider crews. The massive warships that had seemed so powerful minutes ago now felt like sitting ducks. All ships break. Formation and retreat. The Cathara raid leader screamed over their communications, "We'll regroup at the outer system and call for reinforcements." The surviving raiders tried to scatter in different directions, their engines roaring to life, as they desperately sought escape routes. But as they turned to flee, they made a horrifying discovery. During the chaos of battle, while they had been focused on trying to kill the human ships darting between asteroids, the Terran fleet had quietly moved into position around them. Humans had been herding them like sheep the entire time. "Admiral," Jin's voice suddenly echoed across all communication frequencies, calm and terrifyingly controlled. "Going somewhere?" Every escape route was blocked. Captain Ney of the escort frigate Storm's Edge sat directly in the path of the raiders' primary escape route. Her weapons locked onto the lead Cathara vessel. Captain Yong's destroyer Thunderstrike blocked the route toward the nebula. Captain Lee's cruiser's Steel Resolve covered the asteroid field approach. The human ships had moved with perfect coordination. It's like a pack of wolves that had been planning this hunt from the very beginning. Each vessel was exactly where it needed to be, creating an inescapable net around their prey. "Admiral, they're requesting terms of surrender," Captain Na reported. Her voice carrying barely contained disgust as she monitored the enemy communications. The Cathara fleet was broadcasting desperate surrender requests on every frequency, offering to release their prisoners and abandon their claims in exchange for safe passage. Their earlier arrogance had completely vanished, replaced by the kind of terror they usually inflicted on others. Jin's response was delivered in a voice that could freeze Starfire after threatening to execute children. His tone turned to Arctic. "Negative. No quarter asked. None given." The final phase of the battle began with surgical precision that would have impressed any military academy. Each Cathara ship found itself completely isolated, cut off from any support, facing coordinated fire from multiple human vessels that attacked from perfectly calculated angles. The slavers who had terrorized peaceful colonies for decades were learning what real terror felt like. These humans didn't just fight. They hunted with the patience and cunning of apex predators. Lieutenant Jen monitored the enemy communications from his position at the sensor station, listening to the increasingly frantic chatter between Kithara ships. What had started as confident battle commands had degenerated into something very different. "Sir, their communications are getting interesting," Jun reported with dark satisfaction. "They're calling us void demons and death spirits. One captain is screaming that we're impossible creatures from nightmare worlds." Admiral Jin allowed himself a grim smile as he watched another Kithara vessel disappear in a brilliant explosion. On the tactical display, accurate enough. The hunt was almost over, the moment the last raider ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. Something remarkable happened across the entire Terran fleet. The same crews who had just fought with ruthless efficiency immediately transformed into something completely different. Within seconds, the destroyers became saviors. Medical ships that had been holding back during the battle now rushed forward toward the damaged colony vessel. Engineering crews grabbed their repair equipment and prepared for emergency operations. The transition was so swift and complete that it seemed almost impossible. Dr. Han led the first medical team through the docking tube, connecting the horizon's edge to the gentle current. As soon as the airlock opened, she was met with a scene of devastation. Thousands of injured Zilani lay scattered throughout the ship's corridors and medical bays, many of them barely clinging to life. The alien civilians cowered when they first saw the humans approaching. These were the same beings they had just watched obliterate 15 warships with terrifying efficiency. The Zilani had never seen such brutal combat effectiveness, and now these same creatures were walking among them. "It's okay," Dr. Haynes said gently, kneeling beside a wounded Zilani child whose blue skin was pale with shock. Her universal translator converted her words into the melodic musical tones of the Zilani language. "We're here to help you. You're safe now." The transformation in the aliens' expressions was immediate. The fear in their large, dark eyes slowly gave way to confusion, then wonder, and finally hope. How could the same beings who had just destroyed their enemies with such cold precision now speak with such warmth and compassion? For the next 36 hours, Dr. Han worked without stopping. Her hands remained steady, even as exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her completely. She performed surgery after surgery, treating injuries that ranged from minor cuts to life-threatening trauma. The Zilani medical staff watched in amazement as she continued working long past the point where their own species would have collapsed from fatigue. "How is this possible?" whispered Dr. Vethel, the chief Zilani physician, as he watched Dr. Hune complete her 15th consecutive hour of surgery. "Your people should be exhausted by now." Dr. Haynes simply smiled and moved on to the next patient. Humans had evolved to work through exhaustion, to push their bodies beyond normal limits when lives were at stake. It was just another day at the office for a species from a death world. Meanwhile, Engineer Ra worked alongside Zilani technicians in the ship's damaged engine room. Instead of simply fixing what was broken, she was teaching them better ways to build their systems. "This plasma conduit design is more efficient," she explained patiently, showing them modifications that would make their engines 30% more powerful. "And if you reroute the power flow this way, you'll have better redundancy if something gets damaged in the future." The Zilani engineers watched in fascination as Ra freely shared advanced human technology, asking for nothing in return. They had expected conquerors, but instead found teachers and healers who genuinely cared about their welfare. Elder Kethfer moved slowly through the corridors of the gentle current, his 4 arms carefully navigating around the repair crews working throughout his ship. The elderly Zilani historian had lived for over 2 centuries, witnessing the rise and fall of civilizations across the galaxy, but he had never seen anything quite like this. He found Admiral Jin standing alone on the observation deck looking out through the massive viewport at the rescue operations taking place in the space around them. Human and Zilani crew members worked side by side, their small figures moving between the ships like busy insects. The contrast was striking just hours ago. This same space had been filled with the wreckage of destroyed warships. Admiral Kethfer said softly, his translator converting his melodic voice into standard galactic. "May I speak with you?" Jin turned, offering a respectful nod to the elder. "Of course. How are your people doing?" "Better than we have any right to expect," Kethfer replied. But his large dark eyes were filled with confusion rather than gratitude. "That is what I must understand. Your people just destroyed 15 warships with terrible efficiency. I watched your vessels tear apart the raiders like they were made of paper. Now you risk your lives to save complete strangers. How can the same beings be such perfect killers and perfect healers?" Jin was quiet for a long moment, watching a human engineer float between two ships, carrying supplies to help repair the Zilani vessel's damaged life support systems. The man worked with the same focused intensity he had shown during combat, but now his energy was directed towards saving lives instead of taking them. "Our world tried to kill us every day for millions of years," Jin finally said, his voice thoughtful. "Storms that could level cities, predators that hunted in packs, diseases that wiped out entire populations, volcanoes, earthquakes, floods, droughts. Earth threw everything it had at us." Kethfer's forearms gestured in the Zilani expression for deep attention. "But how did this make you both warriors and healers?" "We learned that survival meant protecting the pack," Jin continued, still watching the repair work. "All of us. Or none of us. A human who only knew how to fight would die when winter came. A human who only knew how to heal would die when the predators attacked. We had to master both, or our species would have gone extinct. But the violence we witnessed today, ... double quotes Kethfer's voice trailed off. "Violence is a tool," Jin replied simply, "like fire. It can destroy everything you love, or it can light the way home through a dark forest. We choose when and how to use it." The Zilani elder's large eyes blinked slowly as he processed this. "You're the first species to master both creation and destruction." Jin shook his head gently. "No, Elder. We're the first species you've met that survived long enough to learn the difference." Outside the viewport, a human medic carefully guided an injured Zilani child to safety. The same hands that had operated weapon systems, now cradling new life with infinite gentleness. As the massive colony ship, Gentle Current, slowly limped toward its destination, the Terran escort fleet maintained a protective formation around it. The repairs had stabilized the vessel, but it would take weeks to reach the safety of Zilani space. Admiral Jin didn't mind. His ships had nowhere more important to be. What he didn't realize was that word of the rescue was already spreading across the galaxy faster than their ships could travel. Every communication relay, every trading post, every space station buzzed with the same incredible story. The tale grew with each telling. As stories often do, the peaceful Zilani survivors shared their accounts with anyone who would listen. Spoke of humans who fought like demons, but healed like angels. They described impossible maneuvers through asteroid fields, ships that could survive radiation that would kill other crews, warriors who refused to retreat even when outnumbered. Other species added their own details. Merchants who had traded with humans shared stories of their incredible endurance and strange sense of honor. Pirates who had encountered human patrol ships whispered about their terrifying efficiency and refusal to show mercy to those who preyed on the innocent. 3 days into their journey, Communications Officer Yuna suddenly looked up from her console with an expression of complete bewilderment. Her normally calm demeanor was replaced by something approaching shock. "Admiral," she called out, her voice carrying across the bridge. "We're receiving distress calls from 17 different systems. They're all specifically requesting aid from the legendary human Deathworlders." Jin walked over to her station and studied the incoming messages scrolling across her screen. Each one was similar. Merchant vessels under attack by pirates, colony worlds threatened by slavers, research stations being raided by criminals. And every single distress call included the same phrase, requesting immediate assistance from human Deathworlders. "How do they even know about us?" Yuna asked in amazement. Jin sighed deeply, looking at the star charts showing the locations of all 17 distress calls. They were scattered across 3 different sectors, covering thousands of light years. Pirates, slavers, and raiders across the galaxy had become increasingly bold in recent years, preying on peaceful species who couldn't defend themselves. But now word was spreading about the humans, the pack hunters from the Deathworld who had appeared from nowhere to protect the innocent. Plot courses for the nearest 3 distress calls, he ordered, his voice carrying the weight of destiny. And send a priority message to Fleet Command. Requests additional task forces, as many as they can spare. Commander Ho raised an eyebrow in question. Sir, are we really planning to respond to all of these? Jin looked out at the stars, where, somewhere in the vast darkness, aliens were calling desperately for the Deathworlders who had somehow become their protectors. The irony wasn't lost on him. Humanity had spent centuries wondering if they were alone in the universe. Now they had found their answer, and the galaxy was asking them to serve as its guardians. It seems we've just volunteered humanity to be the galaxy's protectors, he said quietly. We'd better make sure we're ready for the job. The fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace once again, carrying Earth's children toward their destiny as legends born from compassion and forged in the fires of a world that had tried and failed to kill them.